Okay, we are live now, and good morning to everybody watching us on LinkedIn, YouTube, also listening to us in Clubhouse. It's a pleasure to have you with us. I hope that all is going well for you on this cloudy midweek morning. Today we have another guest with us who has been with us before in Clubhouse for a while, but this is the first time when we have Katie Hurd with us on the live stream. Good morning, Katie. It's a pleasure to have you with us. Thank
Thank
you
you.
so very much. Yes, for agreeing to be our guest speaker, actually for reaching out and allowing us to give, to create this session with you. Again, it's a pleasure to have you with us, and I'm sure that the people who are watching us on LinkedIn already know you because you are you have been quite active there. Katie is a coach, business coach, but Katie, I'm not going to talk a lot about you because I want you to introduce yourself, and from there dive into the topic, a journey to Japan and beyond. So, of course, we will be asking questions down the road, and we invite everybody who is listening to us to share their thoughts, share their experiences, so that we can go forward and have a conversation at the end.
Yeah, a morning conversation over coffee. This is the best way to do it.
Yes, great. So, Katie, the floor is yours, and let's start. Please
Yeah.
tell us a bit about yourself first and your connection with Japan and, how you came here and so on.
Yes, good morning. Thank you so much for having me today. Yeah, it's a very long story actually, because I've been here for so long and I've come back now twice since originally coming
Oh,
here. But currently, I'm working as a coach in Tokyo. I work for myself with a few contracts that I'm starting a company. But yeah, my original story of coming here was very humble. I think a lot of people have similar stories in regards to their journey in coming to Japan. So I'm happy to talk about that today and to see if it would be helpful to anyone else out there.
right. But when did you come to Japan? You said that you have been here forever. Not
Yeah.
forever. Yeah.
It feels like that sometimes. I first came to Japan in 2006. So,
Okay.
yeah.
Yeah, that's a long time ago. That was the first time you came as what, as a student or as a
Yeah,
um
so I came here as a student, and it was a pretty long buildup because I started studying Japanese pretty much from middle school. My friends and I were into anime, and my friend had a Japanese exchange student staying at her home. And then when we got into high school, we had a choice between Spanish, French, and Japanese. And I always joke that if I'd studied Spanish, I'd be like completely native by now after studying that long. But Japan, Japanese is an ongoing journey, I think, with the language acquisition. But got into high school, and then I was studying Japanese in high school, but also working in the summers as a part-timer at St. Martin's College. And every summer we'd have the Mukogawa Women's University students come over. So I got to work with them, which was a lot of fun. And that really piqued my interest in Japan. And then in college, I majored in Japanese studies and business and as a minor. And yeah, kind of went from there.
Wow. Okay. So I'm asking, or I ask you that because we usually ask our speakers what's their connection to Japan. But it's interesting to hear that you got interested in Japan before you came here, because some people come here, and maybe this is a generational thing, okay? Because personally, I came to Japan before I developed any interest in the country. So and then but with anime and everything that the Japanese non-profit organizations and the Japanese government have been doing to disperse and to popularize the Japanese culture, I imagine that younger generations come here after they develop that interest in Japan. So
Yeah. It's
yeah.
a it's a recurring theme that I've seen, and I mentioned it before here, but what I absolutely love about Japanese pop culture anime is that, unlike my generation, we had a bad introduction to Japan. World War II movies, it was a totally different vibe. And in 2006, when we moved to Hawaii, my son, we put him into a charter school. my wife started teaching Japanese, and everybody signed up for her course, and the other teachers, they had to shut down the people who wanted to study because the other teachers weren't getting any students in the German class and the Spanish class. And it turns out these kids were crazy about Japan. That was like an epiphany for me. I didn't see that coming. And she used anime to teach Japanese. And just the sheer popularity. So these are 14, 15, 16-year-olds at the time, right? And I wonder, like, what percentage of them will pursue something related to Japan or even go visit Japan because of that allure, that gateway, that hook that gets you into Japan. So I love to see that's how you got in here. And I think it really shows the soft power of Japan that I think is underestimated. It wins hearts. Like, anyway, that's just my observation. Can you hear me?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, no, I think it is really interesting. I know when I was into anime and that kind of thing, I think we were perceived as nerds, like anime nerds. But nowadays, you go back to the States and like it seems like it's very widespread now. It's kind of been accepted as popular culture. And so my sister is a teacher in a high school, and she tells people that her sister is living in Japan, and all the kids are like, "That's so cool." And like, I think back in the day, they were kind of like, oh yeah, anime. I don't know. So it's really interesting to see how it's shifted over the years and I guess become more widely accepted, and people have really embraced anime and Japanese culture.
Yeah.
Right. Yes, it is beautiful. Okay, and then well, let's move forward and see, because that was the very first time you came to Japan. But then what happened next?
So I feel bad.
Yes.
I was just hyping up Japan, and now I'm going to kind of bring it down. So bear with me, but. My experience actually coming here was a bit of, I don't want to say depressing, because it was still an enlightening experience. It was so exciting to be out of the States for the first time. I had only been to Canada, like driving up to Canada, because I'm from Washington State. So it's not a big drive for us to go up there. So it was really the first time I got to go abroad. So it was really, really exciting. I still remember like stepping off the plane and feeling like the humid September air hitting me and being like, whoa, what is this? This is so different. And just like the silly things that you don't really think about anymore. Like, oh, look at all these vending machines, or, oh, what's up with the style here? And, you know, all those little things that you get to experience for the first time was really fun. But I think it was kind of a shock in the end, because after staying here for a year, and this actually happened twice to me, I realized that the business culture and kind of the education style actually didn't sit with me as well. And so after studying here and seeing kind of the way that the teachers treated the students, it's just so different from American culture, where you're kind of treated as your own autonomous person in the States. But here you're kind of treated like a child. And you're not really given a lot of responsibility, and you're kind of scolded a lot if you don't do things. And you're kind of seeing the way that people behave in regards to that culture. And I actually didn't really like it. And so I decided, after coming here for a year to study, well, it was a really great experience. It made friends. It was so cool. But I really decided, I think, that I wanted to work in the States. And so it kind of hit me in a weird way, because I've been studying Japanese for so long. So to kind of come and then feel like maybe I don't want to stay here long term was, I think, something that I had to process. But the irony then is that I went back and I finished my year in college to graduate. And I graduated in 2008, and I had an economics class, I think macroeconomics or something, the final semester before I graduated. And most of the people in that class were like freshmen or sophomores. And I remember the professor saying, you know, it's really lucky none of you guys are graduating, because, man, it's a hard job market out there. And just thinking like, oh boy. So I graduated, and I really, really struggled to find a job in the States. And eventually I was like, you know what? maybe I'll just go back for like a year or two if I can get a job. And so after, all these applications putting out there and getting nothing back, I applied for like 10 jobs. And within a week, I had like 3 offers. It was so fast. And really, it felt like, well, this is what is meant to be, I guess. And so I ended up coming back a second time, also to go to Aichi again, which I had been in before. Okay. So I had friends still there. And I ended up teaching at a juku for 2 years as kind of like an independent teacher. And so it actually ended up being a really great experience, because even though I kind of took away that I didn't really want to be teaching toddlers, and even though it was really interesting, I got to teach, everyone from toddlers up to business people, and had a very flexible schedule. I think like Tokyo suits me a lot better because it was such a small town. It was hard to kind of meet a variety of people. But on the positive side, which maybe a lot of people can relate to who've done like JET or things where you're in a bit more isolated location, I was able to study Japanese. So I studied the N2 for a few months, passed it, studied the N1 for like 6 months, didn't pass it. And then I studied for an additional, I think 6 or 9 months, and then I got it. And so, yeah, while I was waiting for my N1 results, I also was able to travel around Asia because I'd saved up a lot of money being, working as a teacher and not really having a lot of places to spend my income. So I got to travel Asia for 3 or 4 months, which I highly recommend to anyone who has that opportunity. And then, of course, went back to the States thinking, okay, I'm done with Japan now. I'll find a job using Japanese. I've got my N1. Let's go. So,
okay.
Yeah.
3 years for that stint? How long was that stint?
Was 2 years. Yeah, 2 years, 2008.
Okay.
It's interesting, Katie, because I remember when I came to Japan, and we came back in June, the end of June. But the first thing that hit me was the moment we stepped out of the airplane was the humid air.
Yes.
And I think we all felt that, right? Yes. Unless you came in the winter, but
yes.
Yeah. I was gonna say that, like, you actually answered a question I had, so it's really good because you touched on a very important topic. And Maya and I, we're about nuance, right? And there's people who say Japan's so great, and they live in this anime world, and then they come here. I was gonna ask you, like, were you disappointed? And you answered it. So you touched on a very real, nuanced issue, because on the one hand, I love it when people talk up Japan, but I want them to be honest about what are the genuinely wonderful things about Japanese culture. But then there's some people who have this idealized version of Japan, and then they come here and they are crestfallen because their expectations weren't met. So I think there's this people who live here and love it, but also recognize Japan's, downsides, like every culture. We get a little bit annoyed sometimes when, Japan is over idealized, and I think people need to have a better, more balanced and nuanced understanding of, like any culture, it has some fantastic things that I love and some things that don't mesh with my values. But I deal with it because it's their culture, and I'm going to do my best to be a good ambassador. And in some instances, we can also change hearts and minds through our friendships. And so I'm glad you brought that up, because people need to understand it's not the idealized thing that you may think it is. Just a thought.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Indeed, because I think that the very first time when we come, I read somewhere that there is that curve, for people who come to Japan. I don't remember exactly how it was, but there is that
honeymoon.
Yes,
honeymoon theory.
Yes.
And Nihongo Josu desu ne. You just say arigato, and they're all treated like a rock star.
Yes, yeah. But then you go through the stage of realization that the honeymoon is just a honeymoon, and
Yeah, right, exactly.
yes, the reality is quite different, in fact, and you have to deal with it. And then you go, you feel down, and you feel like,
Mm.
oh, I'm not for this place, and so on. And then, yeah, once you got through that, because some people never go through that, actually, right? They just give up, and
And they
that's it.
go back. Yeah,
And they
yeah.
go back, and so on. But I don't know, Katie. So you went back to the United States the second time.
Yes.
Then what happened?
Yes.
Yeah. So this is kind of interesting. So I ended up a month later meeting my ex-husband, who
Okay.
I was with for almost, I think, 13 years. Um,
Woohoo.
but yeah,
Yes.
so literally left, and a month later I met him, and I met him through Lang 8, which is actually a language learning platform, and there was no intention of using it for dating or anything like that. It's just that he and I connected, and then I thought he was in Japan, and he thought I was in Japan, but we're actually both in the States, and we were both living like an hour from each other. And so
Great.
it just kind of like, we didn't realize this for like the first 2 weeks that we were doing language exchange. And then we're like, wait a minute, wait, where do you live? And so I was like, oh, we should go have, Thai food or get coffee or something. And then we met in person. And I was like, wow, he's very nice. And so it kind of went from there. And so then very quickly it was like, okay, so he has to go back to Japan because he was on a dual kind of degree program. And so he had to go back to Japan in the end for another year. So I kind of knew going in that it was likely that I would end up going back to Japan. But in that year, I also ended up getting a job working as a secretary for a Japanese CEO, which
Ooh,
I lasted 2 weeks because
that's
I did not gel with him at all. It was, I think it was my first, it was actually the second time I had power harassment, basically. And I'm not going to say who he is because I don't want to cause, any problems, but it was a good reminder because I feel like a lot of times when I talk to people, they say like, oh, Katie, you've gone so far and it's so cool seeing what you've done in Japan. And I'm like, but I failed a ton, like a ton. Like I have that job that only lasted 2 weeks. Then after that, I ended up getting a job at an energy research company, which was really fun, and doing energy research recruiting for like maybe 8 months. And then towards the end of that job, I actually went to the Boston Career Forum, and I got a job as a recruiter to work as a recruiter in Japan. So it's kind of an interesting transition doing energy research recruiting and then moving into recruiting in Japan. And from where I'm at now, it kind of seems full circle because I got into that job because I was like, I want to help people to like go in the direction they want to go with their lives and improve their lives and have better careers and all that. And that was my motivation. But I don't know if I'm getting ahead of myself, but basically when I came to Japan to do that job before my ex-husband ended up moving back as well to be with him, I didn't find that I fit that job at all. I think maybe it was also the boss that I had in that team was very more focused on results than on relationships with people and doing what's best for people. And that really demotivated me and made me feel really uncomfortable working under him. So after I had come back to Japan and worked in that job for 6 weeks, I actually ended up quitting it. And then this is going to sound crazy to people because it's like I'm quitting jobs, I'm doing jobs, I'm like doing a lot of different things. I think traditionally that sounds like really bad idea, like you should stick with it. But I think it kind of speaks to the uniqueness of the Japanese market because I had several job offers, again, within a matter of weeks. I could have taught English, I could have done other things. And I ended up taking a job in a Japanese construction firm, which I ended up working there. And then after that for a year. And I was basically an OL in that company. So yeah, if you want me to keep going, I can keep going with that story. That was a really interesting job.
yeah. Yeah, to me, because until 2 years ago, I had worked for Japanese organizations only, and most of the time I was the only foreigner there. So it resonates with me, when I hear you say that you didn't gel with this person or that person. I have been luckier. I think I have been luckier than you. So
La, la, There is so much luck involved.
There is a lot of luck involved.
The
Yes.
best boss I ever had was Japanese. The worst boss I ever had was Japanese. And it was the same guy. Yeah.
Oh.
I'm only half joking, but no, I mean, I've had great bosses and there's a lot of luck involved. But I do want to say Maya should be eligible for sainthood because you were employed there for how many years? 14? I like that's, oh my God. I went in with a 2 or 3 year window to just learn as much as I could and then to take a step up and go somewhere else and learn something else. That's how, they were using me, so I figured I might as well just use them too, right back, exploit them too. And but in fairness, I worked for American companies. Both situations have good points and both situations have bad points, but they're not the same. They're trade-offs, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so my final path was, I finally realized I'm a lone wolf. I don't want to work for any of these guys. I want to be on my own. And once I tasted that, I'm unemployable. Nobody wants me in their company. I'm the guy who, runs with scissors. You don't want me on your team, okay?
Let me interject. Sorry, we're getting the comments in the chat section on the Clubhouse.
Yes.
I see like 6 comments, and then for those audience, if I'm sorry because we're sort of like over the several platforms, and if you use the headset, which I am doing, it will improve the volume. And then also, if you prefer, you can go to LinkedIn or YouTube. But if you like, and then if you want to talk to Katie, you can come back to Clubhouse. So so I'm sorry, Amaya and Timothy.
Thank you.
I just wanted to let the audience know. And then I have actually a question to Katie if I can. So let me know when I can.
Go for it.
Oh, thank you. So Katie, I'm actually kind of opposite. So I'm, native Japanese, but I lived in the States longer than I like to admit. And then I worked for, nowadays, for the most of the time, I'm working for an American company entities, but early on I worked for Japanese banks, and I noticed that those the managers sometimes they don't know how to deal with like not so typical employees like me. I went to the college in here, and then he didn't know how to deal with me, and then maybe for you maybe then, so I think things might be different now, but maybe 10 years ago or so, your manager, maybe just didn't know, how to treat you nicely. Is that a fair assessment, or I'm kind of trying to put my, the fellow Japanese a bit of light?
Yeah. So, well, actually, the one at the recruiting company was not Japanese. He was
I'm sorry. Okay.
But
so
no, I absolutely, I think, sorry, I'm like trying not to get into coach mode here because I coach people on this, but I guess like a lot of people base their leadership style either on what feels comfortable for them based on their cultural experience or the way that leaders have treated them in the past. And then they kind of tend to just go with that. But actually, research shows that we should be flexible in our leadership style to meet our team members and kind of set expectations and make sure that we're all going in the same direction. But I find most people don't do that. So it makes a lot of sense that there are so many issues, with people kind of struggling with their manager, or where managers just don't have emotional intelligence because they never learned it, or they never had emotional intelligent managers in the past.
Yeah, I think that.
Go ahead.
I just wanted to say one thing that because in Japanese companies, so the structure and it's not just the structure, but the system actually is set so that people who gain experience and perform well, let's say, they deliver, certain seiseki. Okay, anyway.
Performance,
So they naturally are promoted to the next level, the management level. One thing that I have noticed in the companies I have worked for so far is that managers, even when those people, they grow in the hierarchy and they go up the ladder, they are very few of them are actually trained to be leaders or managers. And we have to be also honest. I think that being a manager and being a leader are two different things. And ideally, you want to have your managers to be leaders too, right? So, but there is very little training, I think, in companies here because you are expected to learn by
To
experience,
adapt to them.
adapt to them. Yes. So
Yeah.
maybe this is one specific thing that we need to remember. And of course, another thing that makes people like you, Katie, necessary. You know.
Right. Yeah, and not only that, plus the cross cultural angle, because I can, Yuka, what you said, I can tell you it's true. I made a living training Japanese managers in the U.S. who had good intentions but had no clue how to motivate, lead the local staff, and the local staff had no idea where their Japanese, many times bosses early on, right? That most of the managers were Japanese, and then it slowly changed and is still changing. So 20 years, I did only that, training both sides, because they didn't know how to adapt their styles to the local culture or vice versa. So that's why I made a living. So it's proof to me, and the same with you, Katie. You're in that situation.
Yeah.
Yuka, do you have any other question?
Oh, Yuka, you are okay.
I don't know. I'm so many. So, it's just a fascinating story. So, yeah, I think I like that, like, that Timothy said, because, like I said, sometimes, like, so, it's like I was just, always like, because I'm here in the States and I lived in California and now we're in the Texas, and the Texas and the California are so, so different. I cannot believe this is a part
Two
of the
different
same.
countries.
Huh? Yeah. I mean, so even in Japan, maybe. So you said that you used to live in a sort of like a countryside, and now in Tokyo, and then you saw the lifestyles are so different. Is that what you say, Katie?
Yes, absolutely different.
And then which do you prefer?
I know there's some people that actually don't like Tokyo, and I think a lot of times it's my Japanese friends who've grown up outside of Tokyo because they like kind of the connection with the local people. And so I do like that aspect of, in the countryside, if I ran into another foreigner or some Japanese person who spoke English, they would usually talk to me, or I would be like, what are you doing here? Hi. What are you doing here, kind of thing, because it was just not that common to see other foreigners. I also often had people just start speaking Portuguese to me because there was a large Brazilian population where I was. So they probably were like, oh, she must be Brazilian, which was really interesting. So I did like that aspect of being able to make connections with people very easily in that sense. You don't really get that as much in Tokyo, I find. But I think for me, if you go like the city mouse or the country mouse route, I have become more of a city mouse type of person. I love the convenience. I love eating out. I love being able to get anywhere on a train in like 30 minutes. It's insanely safe and convenient. And yeah, where I live, there's tons of nature around as well, which is really something I'm very fortunate for. So there's so many things. Just the variety of people as well. I've got friends from all over the world on top of, having Japanese friends, and, my kids get a lot of interaction with people from all over the world. They can really have a global upbringing here, and it's just a lot of fun.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like that because just what you said about your kids, that they can have a global upbringing here. This is not what I heard in the beginning when I came to Tokyo, right? There was a lot of, and I can still hear some, some people have concerns about education and everything, right? But as you say, in Tokyo, you can meet so many people from, as you say, different cultural backgrounds, different upbringings, and there is there are so many educational opportunities and options that you just need to look around and do some research and find what works for you and your kids.
You said people thought you were Portuguese.
Oh no, yeah, they thought I was Brazilian because there were so
Oh, I'm
many
sorry,
Brazilian
Brazilian.
people.
Oh, that's so.
Yeah.
I laugh because my son used to live in New York.
Oh,
Obviously he's half, and they thought he was Puerto Rican.
oh,
That's
how-
fun.
yeah.
He's like one of those tweeners. You don't really can't. He's hard to fit into a category visually, right? So unlike my other son in Tokyo, who you could say, he's got Japanese in him, right? But that's interesting. And the city mouse, country mouse thing too. You know, when I was younger, it was nice being really close to the city. You're young, you're going out, you're socializing, and then my age. I'm in the perfect sweet spot because I'm in the country, Atami, technically, but I'm a 40-minute ride to Shinagawa on the Shinkansen. So we can bop into the city,
Yeah.
good food, we could do our shopping, and then boom, we're back home, right? So, but I totally get if I were younger, I would definitely want to live closer to Tokyo. I'm more of a Yokohama guy, but it's close enough, right?
Yokohama is really nice. Yeah.
I love Yokohama. I love
so
that place.
agree with that. I agree. But the best part of Tokyo to me personally, because this is my dream. I want to live in a condo, like that, they're like maybe 20, 30 stories. And at the bottom floor, there's a 7-Eleven. That's my dream living.
I used to live in an apartment with a 7-Eleven in the first floor, so I can definitely relate to the convenience of that.
That's so convenient. But the countryside gives you so many housings available because and I think the kominka isn't that the trendy term these days? I would love to talk to someone who's sort of living in the kominka one of these days. So Maya, please find somebody. Thank you.
Yeah, I have never lived in a kominka, but yeah, you are right, Yuka. That's a great theme. So I'll look, for someone who has already.
Yes, calling all speakers for Kominka, right?
Yes. Well, right. And then Katie, back to your story.
Yeah. And you keep coming back. So what's that? What motivated you? And maybe you mentioned it to come back again this time.
Yeah, so I did come back. I was planning to come back for like a year or two for basically my ex-husband, who was my boyfriend at that time. And we talked about like coming and then maybe eventually moving back to the States. So I worked for this energy efficiency company after the recruiting job didn't really work out, ironically, thinking it would be so great. But then the culture was just not right in that organization at that time. So then I worked in this electrical construction firm for a year, and I took that job because the pay wasn't great, but I thought it would be a really great opportunity to shift from English teaching into working in like a Japanese company. And it was a very traditional Japanese company. Every day I would come to work at 8. Me and these other ladies would put on our uniforms. And so we had like a little bow with a plaid vest and a pleated skirt. And you could wear tights or you could wear high socks. And I usually wore high socks because it was more comfortable in this hot weather. And we would start the day by cleaning the office. So we went into the ladies' room, we got some towels wet, and we started going around and just wiping down every surface. And oftentimes there were men already in the office. But of course, they're not going to ask to help or anything like that. So they would just kind of be working away. And some of them would ignore us completely and we'd just pass over their desks. And other ones would be like, dozo, please wipe my desk.
Nice of you to allow us to clean your desk.
Wiping down all the surfaces and cleaning the tea machine. And I think we also refreshed the salt on the little office shrine. So very interesting things that you do as like I guess I was like an office lady. I was hired to do international liaison work, but in typical Japanese company fashion, they kind of treated me like, I don't want to say a child, but like a newbie. And so the first year, I think they're like, she's just going to be an office ornament. And so I had like a few projects that I got to work on. So I learned how to use this estimate software and read blueprints and I was basically in charge of running projects and putting the estimates together for their military projects. So there were a couple times I got to go out to the military base and translate to explain like what information they needed in order to get enough information to make a bid and that kind of thing. But I got really bored at that company because they just weren't using me a lot. And I realized after joining that their plan for me was like a 5-year plan building up into an international liaison role and not like fast paced enough for me. And so, but yeah, that was my job, was like going in, washing the towels. We'd be like chatting in the bathroom, washing the towels together every morning, like kind of thinking in my head, like, this is such a unique experience. Like, you know, everybody, this is like similar to like those sports stories where people join the bukatsu and the first year they're just picking up balls and they don't get to actually play. Like, it's like, okay, I'm going to answer the phone.
Toilets.
I'm going to clean the desks off. I'm going to clean your tea machine and serve tea and answer the phone on the lunch breaks while the men go out and have lunch. And like, you know, it was a really unique, humbling experience. But about a year into that, I got headhunted for this leadership training role at Torii Industries in their top of their headquarters, basically in international HR. And I was like, this is really scary because like it's a lot of public speaking, it's working with executives, but I was so motivated to get out of that job and kind of push myself into the next step that I gave like 150%, and I ended up getting the role, which was in hindsight kind of a game changer considering I work in leadership development now. And so that was the next step, as I got into that company and bam, like I started doing leadership trainings. And so that was also very interesting because it was very much like, this is your role. Like you have a box and your role is in that box, and you train leaders and you conduct our leadership trainings exactly as they have been conducted for the last 20 years and don't make any changes. And that's your job. And the first year I kind of did what I was told, but then I was like, well, this is stupid. Like a lot of the facilitators that we were asking to come in and speak to these people who traveled from all over the world to come and be inspired about their job. Like, I think it's about inspiration, right? When you're training leaders, you want them to understand your company, yes, but be inspired as well that they work for such a great company, because a lot of them, Torii was not as big of a name in their countries compared to how it is in Japan. And so it was such a lost opportunity, I felt, because sometimes we had people coming in and just reading off a paper for an hour and then not even taking any questions. And so people were like, what is going on? This is really demotivating. And so it took about 1.5 years of like working on my boss, because he was an intense boss and he didn't really want to hear anything. He just wanted things done the way he wanted them done. So eventually he listened to me and I said, I think we could make a really huge impact if you let me make some changes. And it's a very simple change. All I need to do is develop this e-learning and meet with all of the instructors before the program to let them know a couple simple things they could change to make their presentations better. And at first he was like, no. And then finally, I think it was like 1.5 years in, he let me do it. And I still remember my colleague next to me in those meetings, while I very American-like speak in my Teinego, because I don't use Keigo for the most part. I'm just like meeting with these like, executives who are going to come in and do our presentations and just saying, so, hey, we really appreciate you doing our presentations every year. But, based on our feedback, we see, this is going really well, but this is, maybe not really as aligned with what foreign people expect. And so maybe in Japan, this is the way you would do it, but maybe overseas, people would really get a lot of benefit if you could try doing it a bit more this way. And the whole time I was doing this explanation, my colleague would be next to me being like, but you don't have to put too much effort in. And like, I'm just like, shut up. Like, I'm trying to make change here. So he was next to me kind of like saying, but you don't have to put too much effort in. Don't overdo it. Like, we're just so grateful that you're helping us. Like, it's just, really funny, me telling them what to do. And some of them, for the most part, they were really open to it. We did have a few leaders who were like, what does she think she's doing telling me to like put more effort into my presentations? Doesn't she know who I am? But in the end, I think we had like 12 people that I met to improve their presentations. And I want to say like 9 or 10 of them made drastic changes, and only one of them probably didn't make any changes at all. But in the end, it made like such a huge difference to our program, which I think in Japan, like they do value results improved. So they can see like we used to get a 3.5 across the board on our seminars out of 5. And I think it went up to like a 4.2 or something. I can't remember exactly what it was, but it was a pretty drastic increase. And, you know, I could directly relate it to the change that I had made. So that was really gratifying to be able to make change in that type of traditional organization where I generally got the impression they don't want you to make waves. They don't want you to change anything. They just want you to do your job. So yeah, that was kind of the next kind of big thing that happened in my career. And I stayed there for almost 3 years at that company. And then I kind of decided I didn't want to be put in a box anymore.
Yeah, but you know, I love how you explained this, and well, well, your experience shows that things can be changed, and I know it's difficult to get people moving and you know, to try new things, because I think that the mindset, if it is not broken, don't fix it, right?
It's the safe way to go along with something with tried and true historical track record, at least in their mind. Yeah.
Yeah. But you were there, you convinced your boss to try it, and he allowed you to go ahead with that, and you did it, which is great. So once again, to me, it, because I have been through a couple of such experiences as well during those 14 years in at my previous workplace. And so I always, you know, when somebody says, well, nothing changes here, everything stays the same, I always say, no, things can change, but you really have to know how to approach, you know, that.
Exactly.
You need to find the person who can help you actually implement that change, or, you know, first get the allowance or give you the allowance to go ahead with it, and then be strategic about it. And yes, sometimes, you know, we get people saying, I'm you know, Moshiwakenai, sitting next to you, but at the end of the day, you are the agent of change, and that's not impossible.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
And I like for a few years, I made a living in a Japanese company. All we did was promote change. That's all. That was our job. Kaizen, right? Change, incremental change, but change, right? And our strategy was you do nemawashi with the key people, but you have a conversation with them offline, over a beer, whatever. You get to know them all, right? And you get their feedback, right? And then you disguise your, I don't know if it's disguise, but that's what I'm imposing that meaning through a hanseikai. So you've talked to all these people, they kind of know what you want to do, and then you say, okay, let's have a hanseikai. Here's just like what you did, you may not have called it that, but you're saying, here's the feedback we got. So that's objective. It's not you imposing your interpretation. It's pointing out that the end users are giving you this feedback. Okay, now what can we do? Now we understand the problem. What can we do about it? And then you invite them as well, and you make your, you know, proposal. So it does happen, but it takes longer and it's not efficient, but it can be done. And I don't know, Maya, maybe you've had that experience as well. I'm sure Katie has too.
Yeah. Well, efficiency in general, from what I have experienced,
From the
efficiency
office. Yes,
is usually the last, you know, in the list of priorities, if it ever becomes a priority.
it's a
Right? Yes,
effectiveness is more important.
it is more important. Yes.
Yeah. I feel like for a lot of people that can be successful in Japan or working with Japanese people, it's often a matter of learning the right way of when to eat the humble pie and when to like go in with guns blazing and just make it happen.
pick your battles.
Yeah.
Yes.
You have to learn to pick your battles. Right,
But
right, right.
I think that it's also very relevant to leadership, because as leaders, you cannot be, I mean, the best leaders are the humble leaders. At least that this is my
Mm,
belief, right? And
Certainly in Japan. Yeah,
or yeah, in Japan, even
right.
more so than anywhere else, because being
I would
aggressive, I mean, like, of course, sometimes it pays to be aggressive, and of course, it pays in certain cultures, it is much more productive to be aggressive, but in other cultures, it's the other way around, and here in Japan. So I think that basically, but whatever culture you are, as a leader,
mhm.
you have to be able, to project that confidence, and also be what's that comfortable to say, okay, so this is one thing that I don't know and I need somebody to help me with, right? And this is
Mm,
also a kind of eating the humble pie, as you said in
yeah.
the beginning. But I don't know, because you're that leadership coach, so maybe you can give us a little bit more parallels between the Japanese culture, how things are done here, and leadership and so on. um,
Yeah, yeah. So it is so true that it's really challenging to lead between cultures, because you do have to meet people with where they're at. And a lot of people make the mistake of trying to get other people to meet them with where they're at without having self-awareness of what that actually is. And so I do work with a lot of leaders who they are confident, but they struggle to show that when they're working in multinational companies. They might
mhm.
be pretty effective at the local culture, but they struggle to help the leadership above them to understand the local culture and how to behave in ways that's going to be effective for the organization as a whole. And I think part of that is, as Tim was talking, is also kind of that leading change when companies that are Japanese or very traditionally Japanese get acquired. Um, but I do feel like coaching is kind of a superpower these days, because you can kind of use it to bypass cultural differences. So,
Oh.
like in Japan, they tend to be a lot more indirect. So, it's almost like if you have to give someone feedback, that's already too direct, because you're implying that they're not competent in their job, or that they wouldn't understand that they should have done that without you explicitly telling them. And just the fact of you explicitly telling them, or even like saying, hey, you did an amazing job, a lot of times is really hard for leaders to like develop a recognition practice, because they're like, if I recognize them too much, they're going to feel like, why does he suddenly feel the need to recognize me? Doesn't he know that I just should be happy to do my job, or something like that? So I'll often tell clients, like, developing a coaching practice can be kind of a game changer there, because then you can say to your team members, hey, I'm working on this as a leader. I want to be a better coach and better at developing you all so that you can go in the direction you want with your careers and you feel happy with the way that I'm leading you, not just as a manager, but also as a leader. I really like what you said earlier, Maya, by the way, about the difference between management and leadership. And through doing that, I might ask you in the future to coach you on things. So if I do ask you, please remember that it's just me trying to develop my coaching skills. And if you can entertain me on that, that would be great. And then when you have opportunities to coach them, then you can say, hey, remember how I said I was developing my coaching skills as a leader? Is it okay if I ask you some coaching questions about this? And then hopefully that would take away a bit from, oh crap, he has, negative feedback, or oh, he's getting explicit with me. This is awkward. We don't really do this in our culture.
Mhm.
Because then it's more about the manager trying to develop themselves as a leader to be a better manager to them and help develop them. And people have that kind of recognition of what that actually is. I'm not saying that's going to be foolproof, but I've been seeing that it's been working a bit with some of the clients that I've worked with, to kind of be able to have a safe place to ask more questions and coach their team members more, despite working in cultures where that wouldn't necessarily be as welcome by some of their employees.
Yeah.
I've seen both Japanese and some of my compatriots, and not just Americans, Westerners, who just kind of naturally have a knack for straddling both cultures as leaders.
Mm,
And like, they don't even need any training. They could be helped with training, but they don't really need it because they got that natural knack.
mhm.
And I've often wondered, that would be an interesting study. Like, what is the common point among these people who seem to effortlessly, and they're rare, they're kind of like unicorns, but I've worked with them.
Yeah.
I've worked with Japanese guys who were, they just hit the right tone. But the one thing that I've been a little bit brainwashed in, that, like Maya, I really admire humble leaders, but many of my compatriots see humility as a weakness, while Japanese tend to look at it as being confident and mature. Like,
Yeah.
by downplaying and not bragging about yourself, and having that little bit of humility, and even if it's not real, it's still expected of you often, especially the leaders at the top, right? It's kind of, you're supposed to do it. The Confucian gentleman is supposed to be humble, right?
Yeah.
And so that's where I saw a gap, is in how humility was viewed by my compatriots versus by my Japanese coworkers, right?
Right.
Just an observation. I don't know if you guys agree or disagree, but that's kind of my take.
Yeah. Well, I could say I've studied this for my master's. So generally, the research shows it's self-awareness is the key piece.
Yeah.
People
I'm
who
sure
have
that's a big one.
self-awareness and they know what their strengths are and how those strengths. So it's actually, humility is a very valuable trait. But if we don't recognize our strengths, then we can't see the fact that other people don't have those strengths in a clear way. We might see, oh, they seem incompetent, but it's actually, no, you're just really good at communicating across cultures, and they're not, and they need to have that developed. So you need to recognize that you're really good at it so that you can then see the gap and help them develop that skill rather than judging them as incompetent.
Yeah, to me, I agree with everything you said, even though I haven't gone through all the training you have. But also, personally, what I have felt within myself is that for me, it has been even more important to recognize what I'm not good at. Because the thing is, I'm saying this, and it was really a game changer for me, is that basically, if I didn't recognize that, before I recognized all those, areas which I needed help with or help in, I never actually asked for help. And it would inconvenience not just me, but it would inconvenience people around me as well. Of course, this is one of the ways when I eventually got to terms with, what I was not good at. So I knew that there were two ways. The first one is, of course, ask for help, and the second one was to go study, right? Just find the right school, or find the right coach, or find a way to learn. So and this was a real game changer for me. So in addition to what you just said, so I don't know whether that has been something for you, or maybe the people you work with. I would love to hear about this as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I totally agree with that. Having recognition of our weaknesses, but also keeping a growth mindset in that, so that you're getting kind of a fast track to growth, I think can be a really big game changer. I know I had a tendency in life to try to do everything on my own in the past, especially before having kids, which once you have kids, at least in my case, I was like, you can't do it on your own anymore. I had a coach. I had, a lot of help with childcare a lot of it that I hired out. Like, of course, daycare is just, I can't say enough good things about daycare staff, because like I couldn't do my job. I couldn't run my own business if I didn't have such an amazing daycare at my disposal. But I love that phrase. It's like, you don't pay the artist for the 4 hours they took to paint the beautiful picture. You pay them for the 20 years that they spent painting for 4 hours every day. And I feel like that's so true in life. If you can find someone who has the knowledge that you need and kind of tell you, because
we just talked about this. That's why I'm laughing.
really? Oh no, did you talk about it already in another podcast?
We just had this conversation a couple of days ago, but go ahead. Go. Sorry, Jennifer.
Go
No,
ahead.
no, no. But yeah, no, I really do feel like I wouldn't be where I'm at now if I hadn't hired my coach, because one of the first things she said to me is, so you're doing life coaching. I think you should be doing corporate coaching, at least like as part of your work. And like, that was such a game changer. As soon as I started doing corporate coaching, I just enjoyed it so much. And you could see so much impact. And as much as I love life coaching on a one-to-one basis, being able to change leaders who then can impact entire teams and entire organizations from such a high level in their organization, being able to motivate, women and other mothers who are just really struggling, trying to make it at the top, like partners and executives, and reminding them that just being a woman in leadership and giving that model and being emotionally intelligent and showing up professionally every day is such a positive impact on society. Like, it's just been so meaningful for me to be able to do this type of work. And I feel so grateful to that coach who told me, like, it's just one thing. Like, I hired her for 2 years, but that alone was worth it. Just telling me, like, why don't you try doing corporate coaching? And I might never have done it if she hadn't suggested it, because I would have been like, oof, I just got out of the corporate world. Like, do I really want to get back into it?
Right. Yeah, indeed. But I love what you also just said about women, how important it is for women to realize that, first of all, they need help. I'm sure that women basically, because of all these tasks that we go through, like motherhood and working and multitasking and so on. So our brains are better wired to multitask. And I think that not everybody, of course, and I'm not saying that it is, a clear-cut play or whatever you call that. But of course, within women, we can find more people who can actually, who are more sensitive towards the needs of the people around them. And maybe that's because women are created to be mothers, and to be the community keepers or whatever you call them. But at the same time, I also want to say that it's very difficult for women because of this to actually reach leadership positions and to stay there because of that sensitivity, right? It's and maybe emotional intelligence it has a lot to do with this as well, because you don't want you don't want to compete with men on their terms. You want to compete,
Exactly.
right? You want to be the woman you are and be a leader at the same time.
Exactly. Because we screw a lot of stuff up. You don't want to be like us. And the other thing is, I just want to, just to be fair, men need help too. We just don't want to admit it to ourselves.
Right.
We need different kinds of help. We need you
Yeah.
guys to help us. But
Yeah. Tim, I find it really, really interesting, because I know a lot of coaches in the coaching space, and even like the male coaches sometimes are marketing themselves as coaches for women. And I just find that so interesting. Like, who is coaching? Who is niching to coach the men? Because men need help, right? Just like every human being will need help at some point in their lives, or will benefit potentially from being pointed in a different direction or having a certain type of support. And yet I feel like it's in society, it's much more accepted for women to get support. And for men, maybe it's seen as like a failing or like a weakness. And it's like,
macho.
We all have weaknesses. We all have times when we fail. I know I've failed so many times. I've been telling, my friends and my siblings who are going through some hard times recently about this. I'm like, I've quit 3 jobs within like 6 weeks because all 3 of them were going to destroy my mental health, and it wasn't worth it. And I was fortunate to be in a situation where financially I could do that. But, you can fail and you can still be very successful in life. I think it's about learning from your failures and trying to do the hard things. If you try to do hard things, you're going to fail. Like, that's just the way it is.
Oh, it goes with the territory, right? Because if you play anything, then there
You
is
have to
no
be out of your comfort zone to grow. You
Mm.
have to. It's not a choice. It sucks, but you
yeah,
have to. It's painful, right?
it is. Yeah. But I think that the pain is worth it at the end.
Oh yeah, for sure. Yeah, for
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, great. So we have just passed the 9 o'clock,
Oh,
well, the
wow.
hour.
We're done.
This has been a great conversation, Katie. Thank you so very
Yeah,
much.
we all
Yes.
got to know you much better. So thank you for
Yes.
sharing your experiences.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
thanks so much for having me. This was so
Oh,
much
yeah.
fun.
Yeah, thank you so
Thanks a
much.
lot. Yes, and well, I really hope that we keep in touch, and also we can meet again. In not so distant future, maybe quite
Mm.
soon, actually. So thank you so much for this, and to everybody who is watching
Thank
us
you.
or listening to us, I do encourage you to connect with Katie on LinkedIn or any other social media you're on, and she's on. You can look her up because there is only one Katie Hurd. So
Only
reach out
one.
Only one.
only. Yes, and connect with her. And also, if you have any questions or if you need assistance, please be proactive and tell her about that so that you can actually establish that relationship and probably go forward and find new lanes of realization in business. So, and at the same time, I want to say once again, I hope that where you are at the moment, so the weather there is sunny and you're getting a lot of that sunshine, because here in Tokyo it's cloudy and a kind of, it's going to rain anyway.
Ditto for
So,
us. Yeah.
yeah, but that's it. Well, Katie, once again, it was such a pleasure having you with us.
Thank
Indeed.
you.
Thank you. So much fun.
Yeah,
Thank
thanks.
you
Thank
from
you,
Clubhouse.
Yuka. Yes,
Luca.
thank you a lot for that. Yes. Okay.